I am here with Kurohitsuki, and we are talking about the role of combos in EDH and multiplayer philosophy. So, if you want to briefly introduce yourself, Kuro, and tell people where we can find you.
Hello, I am Kurohitsuki. You can find me at twitch.tv/Kurohitsuki, as well as on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places. That is where you can find me and what I got going on.
And links to those will be in the description. If you aren't familiar with Kuro, you absolutely should be. And you may have seen him hosting the Representation Matters event. And at the time this comes out, you'll also have attended the Commander Sealed event, correct?
Yes, Commander Sealed and potentially even Magic Vegas. Who knows? Who knows when this will go up?
Yeah, the timing is great. We interviewed Gunnar Wuhair not that long ago, and
Nice.
I wish I had interviewed him much earlier so we could get it out before the Commander Sealed event went off, because that would have been a really nice shout to have gotten done. But I didn't know I was going to interview him at the time, because I actually got put onto him from a girl named Ron, which of course
There we go.
we made that connection. So we're hitting a lot of faces today. So today's topic is the role of combos in EDH, and we've already had this discussion once, but we're going to go over it again. For the audience at home, when we're talking about combos, we're talking about anything that goes infinite, basically. Anything that produces infinite resources, an infinite board state of some kind, like creatures dying or creatures entering, and also things that will just win the game. But also things that won't just win the game, things that might just make infinite artifacts or what have you. So there's different ways you can look at it. Most of the time when people talk about combos, they're talking about things that win the game, but you can certainly include things that just make ridiculous board states, because that's what Commander is all about. So we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons and whether or not you should be putting them in your decks, and definitely the situations where it might be more appropriate than others.
Sounds about right. There's a lot to talk about in that regard, and I think, of course, part of it's like subjectivity, right? It's just kind of like how you view them, whether like in your pods, outside of your normal pod. There's definitely something to be said, like, hey, if you're going to be at an event or something and you want to make sure that you have an out, kind of almost no matter who you're playing against, maybe your deck should just have a combo in it, or it's all good as long as you mention it beforehand and everything. So there's a lot to talk about for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when you're in a competitive context. If you're at a tournament or you're playing CDH, there it's kind of the expectation that there's going to be combos involved. When it comes to the casual pods, it becomes much more of an issue of respecting everyone's time and making sure that everybody got to play and do the thing that casual decks do. I think that generally speaking, you don't want to be comboing out on decks that just can't win instantly, at instant speed like that. Playing as precons, probably not the place to do it. But more so than that, I think you need to actually have the conversation with your pod and let them know, like, hey, there's combos in here, or there's at least a combo in here. And if I get it, not going to hold it back. You'll hear about sandbagging in the next, either in the next episode or the one after that. But generally speaking, I would say it's poor form to be comboing out early in the game. And sometimes that's not something you can actually control, but it's also something that you have to set that expectation with the pod. You need to make sure that they understand that could happen and that they need to watch out for you.
Definitely, like, just the concept, just like the nut hand, where it's just like, wow, this is really wild. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes you just get that hand with like Soul Ring, Talisman, your commander, and then boom, right? You just kind of like have it, and that's okay. I don't think I should feel bad for comboing out early game if you just happen to have it. I say, like, the issue is like making sure your opponent knows, like, hey, yeah, this isn't like normal. This is I just so happen to draw like the perfect amount of cards, but like, let's just quickly just start the next game. Let's just move on to the next one, and it'll be all fine.
I think that you always end up in one of two camps here, which is that camp where, oh boy, we get to play another game, that's why I play CDH, because the games are really fun and interactive, but you get to play more games as long as not everybody's playing control at the table, I personally don't mind those things happening. I really actually think it's cool when somebody pulls off the combo, and I would rather it happen very early on than have it happen halfway through the game when I'm still assembling, value engines. I don't want to play half a game. I would rather play the first 3 turns and lose than play the first like 7 turns and the game's over, but all of us were like halfway in and we didn't actually get
Right.
to do everything we wanted to do. It feels a lot more disappointing because you've seen a lot more cards at that point, so you kind of have this idea in your head how the game's going to go. To me personally, I think that's way more exciting to have that happen in the early game because it's a rarity, like you said. But you could definitely argue the other way. And for anyone listening, I'm sure there's probably at least one person listening who thinks we're absolutely insane and thinks that combos should just be completely illegal. And if you have that opinion, then feel free to let us know in the comments. But there'll probably be a few people that are going to have differing opinions from you on that.
There's a lot of opinions to have, right? I mean, it's just, as I was saying, it's like there's a lot of different avenues to go over this. Sometimes it depends on like the type of combo. Me personally, I have 49 decks now in Commander, and it's like I like to make sure that there is at least one combo in every deck if I need some sort of out, right? It's just more like a win redundancy sort of thing, especially if it like revolves around my commander. That's usually how I like to limit it. Is like at least it like really heavily involves my commander one way or another. But like, I'll mention it if it's something really unfun like Mindslaver Lock or something like that. But even just in like casual combat decks, right? It's just like, okay, well, I do have at some point an out to get infinite creatures in order to like bowl everyone over. But it's gonna be like it's one card that needs to pair up with another card and my commander on top of it, and it's all very, very obvious when it happens. I don't even feel like I need to mention that one. That's just like a understanding what's on the board sort of thing.
Some commanders, you really kind of have to understand what they are and know that that's coming. But I do think that commander reliant combos are at least more interesting and more in the spirit of the format, because the ones that aren't part of the strategy of your commander, I think those are the ones that get people salty. The ones that are just, I just found these 2 cards together and they just worked out really well. I think if your commander is involved, it becomes this common linchpin thing where at least people can interact with your commander, whereas other win conditions might be all on the stack where not every color has an option to deal with it. Not only is it just more fun that your commander is part of that, but it's also a lot more, I'm blanking on the word here.
It's like, why are we playing commander in a way? It's just like, I really wanted to see what your commander had to do. And it turns out, hey, yeah, that's a unique combo that your commander is able to do. That's awesome.
Being in the spirit of the format is really there. And also if it's a commander that's known for having access to this combo or for really enabling a combo, then you kind of see it coming. You're not surprised by it. It's not just a twin flame and a dual caster mage. It's actually something that you can interact with and say like, hey, this person's probably in a combo because it's what their commander does. So we're going to kill their commander. We're going to bring their life total down. We're going to make it so they can't set up a value engine. You're kind of setting the mood when you do that. Obviously, you should be having this rule 0 conversation saying like, hey, this is what the commander does. This is the power level it's at. But sometimes the commander does does tell your opponents that, hey, I'm arch enemy today and you just need to deal with it.
Right. Being the arch enemy, there's a lot of ways to do it, right? It's not just about having a giant board. Sometimes it is just like, hey, I have this very clear and present combo. You should probably want to do something about it, That's equally valid in terms of just like, this is just commander. That's just how it goes. Not everything is going to be completely combat based.
I'm so glad you said that because that's kind of the conversation I hear a lot, especially on Twitter. And I know Twitter is not the best place to have this discourse, but a lot of people seem to think that games should only end by combat. And well, I love combat and I love a combat based combo as well. Some decks just can't do it. And some strategies just can't do it. If you're like me and you really like playing Izzet, I'm probably playing Spellslinger. Like maybe I can beat you down with my 1/1 tokens that I'm getting off of, Young Pizzy or off of Murmuring Mystic, but probably not, right? I probably need to accrue some kind of advantage and win some other way. And some decks just can't really win efficiently without having access to a combo. If it works with your commander, great. But if your commander really doesn't do that, there's nothing inherently wrong with having a commander completely agnostic combo as long as people know that it's there. Games got to end. Games have to end, and it's perfectly okay. This format is insane. We have access to all the cards. People should be expecting that stuff like this can happen as long as you go into that with that conversation. I do understand the perspective that combos can be boring. And if you don't want to do it, there's no wrong way to play. If you don't like combos and you want to play a deck with no win condition, go for it. I've done it. And I've won games with it, and it's super fun. There's no wrong way to play here. But I absolutely think that if you have the ability to play a combo, you shouldn't feel bad about including that in your deck. And generally speaking, I think that most people should put at least one combo in their deck so they have something to shoot for if the game really goes sideways and you need to become the threat again.
Personally, and I think I'm lucky, I've never run into the like commander has to be through combat crowd. Like I just never have, and I gotta say I'm glad not to, because that's just that just seems very silly to me. Not every commander can get there through com. So like commander's about the expression of, at least in my opinion, it's the expression of you and that commander and the deck that you've built around it, for it and everything. And if you have Niv Mizzet because he's your favorite dragon wizard guy, rock on, with the draw a card, deal 1 damage combo. Yeah, the curiosity combo, like rock on with it, honestly. And at a certain point, if I sit down with Niv Mizzet, I will just say, like, this is a Niv Mizzet deck. He's known to have that curiosity combo. So I'll say, like, hey, yeah, this is like your typical Niv Mizzet deck. There's like this curiosity I'm trying to go off. And if someone asks for like further explanation, absolutely, I will explain it for sure. It's not that hard, it's pretty straightforward. If someone's just like, okay, yeah, I'm really trying to go like slower than that, it's like, okay, absolutely fine. I'll try to switch to something else or maybe find a different pod, whatever. I try not to necessarily like play differently depending on who I'm playing against. I typically just like the deck to match the table, and then you just play the best you can to win when you're at it. But if Niv Mizzet wins through combos, that's just kind of how it is. And you, as a commander player, should be kind of okay with that level of expression, because there is a way for people in combat decks to beat combat decks to beat combo decks, like for sure. If you're necessarily of the opinion that commander has to be through combat damage and that any and all combos are like against the spirit of it, personally, I think that's more of a you're mad at losing thing than like a real reasonable take.
That's going to get some people heated in the comments. I already know.
We can discuss it, right? Because again, I've never run into those people. It is literally something I've never encountered. So it's definitely a straw man for me until I actually interact with those kind of people. But I would like to hear the argument that it has to be through combat damage, because then, like, how do you play half the commanders out there? Like, how do you express yourself?
I think it's mostly the battle cruiser crowd, the people who want commander to be maybe more about just playing slow magic and not so much about the commanders themselves. I know there's some people out there that really don't care about the commander and really just care about playing the color combination that they like. And that's super valid. But also everybody else probably is not playing that, If you have a play group that's like that, great. I'm so happy for you that you have friends that like the same things you like. But I think the majority of people play Commander because it's a social experience that you get to express yourself. There's not really a similar experience otherwise. So I think that you're pretty dead on in your assessment. I think most people are going to be of that opinion as well. It's definitely not... There's so many ways to play this game that, like, there's no wrong way to play this. I really want to make that super clear here, is however you want to play, however you have fun is super, super valid. And the only thing that really matters is that everyone there is there by their own consent and that they're happy to be there. That's the whole point of a social experience.
You want to make it a fun experience. Ideally, right? You want to have a fun experience for the whole table, not just yourself. Because then that's the only time I'd say it's like necessarily the wrong way to play Commander. When you yourself have like done what you can to make it a worse experience for everyone else. If someone says like, "Hey, we're trying to play low power, just trying to sit back, battle cruiser, have fun," and then you like, sit down there with your Niv Mizzet Power Rune deck and just kind of go off on turn 3, like, I mean, that's rude on you. You're putting the bad taste in the mouth of those people who specifically said they're looking for battle cruiser, and then you combo out on turn 3 with Niv Mizzet because you chose to sit down with that. You're ruining it more so than anyone else, I would say. For me, it comes down to the expression and then trying to share in that expression with everyone else at the table. And having a conversation, we try to promote Rule Zero where we can. And even Rule Zero is kind of a subjective experience too. I think Rule Zero is a very online concept because typically, it's hard to just walk away from the table and play at a different one online, where you have to basically like, disconnect from the call and kind of make it more awkward that way. So Rule Zero is definitely a concept that we should try to bring more into the physical realm. Just being able to determine like, hey, yeah, this is not the table for me, and that's okay. Because I know if I sit down here, they're not even going to be close to having a good time. And even though I might win the game, I probably like would prefer a game where I'm invited back to play versus I just pub stomp the table and then like, now they never want to play with me again, sort of thing.
Right. If you want to keep playing with people, you do have to actually participate in the social contract. I don't think anyone's talked about the social contract in a long time, but it's just like if you were sitting down with 3 other people at the pub and you're eating and drinking and you're having a conversation. Everyone's there to have a good time. So if you come up and start just info dropping about something that nobody cares about and they are just kind of forced to sit there and listen to you because they're kind of committed to the social experience, then they're going to have a bad time and they're not going to want to spend any more time with you. And it's the exact same thing in Magic. And I also want to say that the Rule Zero conversation is, you never really hear about this, but it should and must, I think, include a post-game conversation. I think if you leave a game, you should be able to say like, hey, that was really fun, or hey, that was really unfun because of X, Y, and Z, because you played a combo and I wasn't aware of it, or because somebody brought stacks to the table and it was really just unfun for the level of play we were having. Just being honest about what's in your deck is something that's really important there. So if you have that post-game conversation as well as your Rule Zero conversation, then at the very least, you're going to be informed for the next time you play. And the people involved are going to give you that feedback. I guarantee it. Magic players are very good at voicing their opinions. So you'll hear about it if you did something that was unfun. And a lot of times I think that the salt from combos is just because someone didn't see it coming. Because there's a place for everyone. There's a place for every play style, a place for every deck, every strategy. And sometimes that is just not the pod that you're in. That's okay. But you need to be able to cater to what everyone wants to do because it's a social experience. You're not playing against computers. You're playing against real people, even if you don't see their faces, because you're playing online or you're playing on Magic Online or that kind of thing. And you won't have...
And you're also just not playing one-on-one as well. That is also just like a big distinction that is specifically in the EDH Commander realm. It is the social part. There is a slight meta game on like, are we having a good experience here versus, I'm just trying to win. And I know that there's definitely difficulties for people coming from one-on-one. I mean, you can have a good game with people in one-on-one. 100, like obviously, right? You can have great games with people in one-on-one and you're trying to do everything you can to like murder that person basically. And you can still have a good time. It's just a different format, right? It's just a different format now where like there is a social component and the goal typically is actually not just to win that game, but also to want to have a table and a group to play with for the next game to be able to like continue this conversation of your relationship with this commander and the decks that you have and everything with that person in the future as well. It's a difficult conversation to have, especially since this is, the social part of Magic. Not everyone, like literally, like not every human is really, really good at navigating that social aspect. And it's also not just you, right? Like you can reach out and say, hey, how did that game go? And then that person also needs to be pretty, rather forthcoming with how they actually felt about the game too, right? It's a dance between you and three other players, both before, during, and after the game, and there's a lot of room to mess up, but there's also a lot of room to like grow and find new ways to dance with each other too. That's what makes it difficult, but also very beautiful. And I would say like the role that combos play is it's just another style of dance in this analogy. It's just another way to have that self-expression with your deck, of your relationship with the commander, with your relationship with magic, the social experience with it, everything. It's all just part of the conversation. And combos, just like fighting in with combat, is another way to like just add spice to that discussion. And there's also definitely a conversation to be had between like what is combo and what is just high levels of synergy as well. If combo is just something that's like infiniting out, even that has like different varieties of flavor too.
Yeah, so this is something I've actually run into on like Lion's stream because I've had pods that say like, "Hey, we don't want to win by infinite combos," and I'm like, "All right, cool, I won't do that." But I've also had pods like Lions where they just don't want any kind of infinite at all. That's totally fine. You play around it. But I've also had decks that don't win the game off of infinites, but will make infinite clue tokens or infinite food tokens. My Samwise Gamgee deck that I believe I've played on the channel, it does that, and it does it not even purposefully. It does it incidentally
Yeah,
because there's just
yeah, that's the thing. You just mentioning Samwise, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like an accidental infinite. That literally just happens.
that can be a thing, and not with a lot of commanders like that because there's sometimes like your synergy pieces just work out like that. I'll try to link if there's a video I can link to. The VOD will probably be expired by the time this comes out, but there's definitely been situations where I've made infinite food tokens with Samwise purely because I had two creatures that flicker each other, and it just worked out that way. And it didn't necessarily win me the game, but I still sort of went infinite. And people might have different reactions to that. It might be a totally different experience for somebody. They might say, "Oh, that's super cool," and now we have to deal with this board state where you have access to an infinite amount of this resource. And other people might be completely against it because you went infinite at all. It's valid either way. Everybody's feelings are valid here. You know, it depends on the play group, but I went into that. I've played with Samwise a lot, and I played with it on a couple streams, and one of which didn't allow combos and one did. And I play it differently because if I can't run combos, then I just avoid playing the cards that will do that. And that completely changes the style of the deck. And that's not where I want to be. I would rather be where I can combo out. So it's important to be able to join the pods that don't want to play with combos. If you're struggling to find a pod because you don't want to play combos, then obviously you have to have your own deck that doesn't have a combo in it, even if it's accidental.
That's just another layer of difficulty, right? Or it's just like, I mean, you could get a table where two out of the four people there, not even including yourself, like two of your opponents, understand that like Samwise next to a ham sandwich can just make infinite food, and that's okay. It's just infinite food. You didn't actually like have infinite damage with it. You just the words just say that you make infinite food. Okay, and that's okay. And if you were playing against me, I would literally just move on and be like, okay, that's totally fine. But you might have someone else at the table, depending on their disposition about combos or just how they're feeling that day, et cetera, who gets really heated about it and saying like, hey, we said no infinites, we said no blah blah blah. And infinite food just doesn't have to be a part of your strategy. Your blue Samwise Gamgee's green white. You don't have the red cards to say every time an artifact comes into play, deal one damage or something. That's not your strategy. It's just green white. You just had infinite food.
Yeah,
So it doesn't really matter.
Wizards are too big
They
of
could
cowards to print that card.
But like, yeah, it could just happen, and one person can feel some sort of way about it while the rest are perfectly fine, and that's still just like another issue to navigate, right? And there's not really like specific dialogue tree option to like kind of talk your way out of that one, right? So a lot of people just have to be open minded and understand that like in this game sometimes things just happen, and some things just aren't that big of a threat, even though they pose that. I know I definitely like have an over tuned threat detection for tutors, like 100%. I'll admit that my fight reflex is absolutely turned on as soon as anyone tutors for something, and that's my own thing to try to like move through, or not really like complain too much about it, because I mean, sometimes it just happens and everything. And yeah, some people just need to do that with combos, or just understand that like, hey, sometimes combos take 5 different cards to work, and that's just as much effort as like beating someone with your creatures. You know what I mean? It's almost a discussion that's not worth having, but it's still definitely worth having. And no one could ever truly give you like the perfect answer other than just do your best to try to have as many people have a good time as possible.
Yeah, sorry for anybody that was wanting like a definitive conclusion from this conversation. There is none. Every way of
Yeah.
playing is valid. Every style that you enjoy is valid. And there's just a playgroup
Mhm.
for everybody, unfortunately. And sometimes you just have to find it. It's just
And there's
how
a
it
lot of
is.
playgroups.
There's a
And
lot
the
of
thing is, like,
playgroups.
there's
Yeah.
infinite playgroups too, right? Like, it's not just you can only play at home with your 3 friends. Sometimes it's like 2 of your friends go to the store, and the first person you run into didn't really vibe, but like the next person might, or you go to another friend's house and you vibe with them, and then then you go to Spell Table and you join the Kurohitsuki stream and you vibe with everyone there. There's a lot of homes for everyone, for every different type of deck, every different type of person, every different type of play style. Maybe, saying that you want to play casual commander at like a power level 6, and God forbid we even try to define what that means. And that's like your zone that you want to stick to. Maybe for a different deck, you wanted to get a bit more competitive. Maybe you want to play Niv Mizzet, and it turns out the best way to play Niv Mizzet, true to him as a character, is probably Curiosity Combo. You're gonna have to find a different pod for that on power level 6, most likely. So then you just kind of go do that, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine and valid. You build a Niv Mizzet deck for your low power pod, and you play one game, and it turns out they didn't have a lot of fun. Hopefully, the people you're in the pod with can just say like, "Hey, that wasn't very fun. Can you play the other deck again or whatever?" And then you just move on to the next game, and it's all good. And then when you want to play Niv Mizzet, you find a different pod to play with, sort of thing, right? Like you don't have to get heated. You don't have to keep this deep-seated hatred for an entire play style, especially one as open and fluid as just like combo. What an open concept to be mad at, and you just move on to the next game. Like it's okay. Combo's not really going to ruin your life. You just try to find a table that kind of understands or agrees with your version of no combo, and then you just play with them and be open to other people joining that group and maybe not understanding. It's okay. Maybe that person will conform to your stance or pull out a deck that has your stance, or they don't, and then they just move on and you move on.
Something you said there, I think is really important and bears reiterating here is that you can start the conversation. You can start the rule zero conversation by asking for a game or a pod at a certain level. If you say you want to play these low power decks, you start the conversation by saying, "This is the ground rules that I want to play at." That will generally help you, especially online. Maybe not so much on Magic Online where people don't read. But
Yeah.
no hate, but Magic Online players are a different breed. But if you're playing like in Kuro's Discord, or you're playing in my Discord, just ask for a game and say what you want. Don't go into a pod blind and just expect everybody to know what you're playing or what power level you wanted. If you go into a pod blind with horseshoe crab typal, then you
Mhm.
can't be mad when someone combos out because you didn't say I'm playing bad deck tribal. You have to ask for that. You have to be part of the conversation. So it bears repeating. You have to start
I-
the conversation by asking for the experience that you want.
And I will say, I think a lot, and like I know, and I say this to literally everyone. I will be the first to admit it, and I'll never deny it. I have been outrageously lucky with the amount of like just the amount and the type and the genre of people that I've played Magic with, especially either as a content creator or even before that. And also just like the area I live in, Buffalo, New York, it's just like we just have a glutton of like card stores and many players to play against. So I've been able to kind of play with a lot of different styles. I've been very lucky with the people I've been able to play with. And typically I don't run into many disagreements in terms of just like, the type of game we're trying to have. And even if I do, me and that player will talk it out. Or it's just like, whatever, I'll get over it by tomorrow, sort of thing. I'll just play with that person again later or much later or something. It's just whatever. I just move on from it. But even if I don't have that real zero conversation, I can work on it better for my streams personally. No one else knows who's in the stream with me. No one else knows what commander is being played. My sign up form literally just says like, "Hey, who's your spicy commander that you want to play?" It's like I'm not asking for your most powerful. I'm just asking for your spiciest. Like the thing that's just the most exciting. What do you think will put on like a good show, not just who's going to combo out fastest. And I've been outrageously lucky with largely being able to find many people who understand that, and our games go to turn 6 and beyond 9 times out of 10 because like we're all moving slowly enough, or at least like inefficiently enough, because we don't all have just like every turn 0 mana rock to like work up to that combo or that combat finisher or that heavy synergy moment. And I wish that for everyone personally. I wish that everyone was able to have that like 9 times out of 10, your games are great, even though you're meeting new people almost every single time. Because that is just, it has certainly allowed me to enjoy Magic as much as I have. And I think that is attainable for everyone, one way or another. I believe that you are able to continue to open up yourself as a person and as a player to keep on finding those people that kind of, agree with what spicy means to you. Through that, you can learn to expand your worldview on different types of decks, whether they be combo, combat, synergy, meme decks, CDH, etc. Like you can expand your appreciation for all of those the more you play with a lot of different types of people, and just also understand that it is just a game, and you can walk away from a table. You can move on to a different table and just forget about that last game. You can remember the players that you liked playing with that last time and try to find them again. Maybe you find a deck style that you actually really like and try to talk to that person about it afterwards, etc. There is a lot of ways to go about this. While there's not necessarily an answer deck wise to say, hey, you have to play this type of deck in this situation in order to lead to a good time for everyone. That's not possible. You can't do that with only 100 cards. But I think that your disposition that you enter and leave, and hey, even while like you're in these games, the disposition that you have is, I think, probably the most important thing. I will loudly to the heavens exclaim how much I hate group hug every single time. The group hug is my least favorite style of deck to play against, because just how I enjoy Magic, it just goes contrary to that. And I'll voice that during the game, but I'm not going to do it in like such a way where it's just like, oh my god, I can't believe you're playing group hug. Really? Group hug freaking sucks. Like why are you even doing this? I can't believe, that's like aggressive and not helpful to anyone. But the way I'll say like, oh my god, group hug player, look what you did. He already his deck is already full of draw cards, and now you just drew 5 more cards. What did you do? Like, that sort of way to interact with like the situation is a way in which you can it's certainly a way I've found that I can express my displeasure with group hug without necessarily making someone feel awful or feel terrible, right?
Bring the
And
energy you want to get out of the playgroup. That's what I'm hearing.
yes, there we go. Yes. Bring in the energy that you wish people would have about your deck, even if they don't like your deck, right? If you don't like combo, you don't have to sit there and just go like, oh my god, fucking combo. Like this is why I said I don't want combo guys. Like, oh my god, he's just going on for like 10 minutes. Jesus Christ. There's a way to say all of those things way nicer and make it a far better experience like for everyone. There's a cadence that you can have. There's a way to have fun with it still that can one make sure that you don't walk away that salty about it. And then also, hey, that person will heal your complaints. Luckily there was some laughter with it, so they don't feel like too bad about it. But yeah, maybe they'll remember for next time, they don't bring the combo deck. Or, oh wow, I do hear people say about this about my deck a lot. Maybe I should switch it up or make a new deck or blah 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 blah. There's a way that you can approach these situations, still air your grievances, but not make it an unfun time for everyone involved, including yourself.
If you have nothing nice to say, if you just can't bear to do it, you can just hold your peace and wait till after the game is over and then talk about it in the post game. Because that's going to be like a little bit more of a diffuse situation where you're not going to make someone feel bad about the way they're playing in the moment. And maybe they can think about it more after the game where everybody's, shuffling up or bring out a new deck or something like that, where they can kind of look at it in a retrospective and not feel bad about just trying to win the game in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is like 100%. It's difficult. That's absolutely a way to engage it, and sometimes it's not even right after the game. Like I said earlier, like I definitely wait for some time in between, just so they not only for myself but also for other players to just be like less heated or feel less attached to that game. Especially now that like after a good night's rest, it's like that's yesterday's news, whatever sort of thing. There's a there's a cadence. There's a cadence to have, but arguably, I would rather have those discussions versus trying to make like the perfect penultimate deck that makes everyone happy.
Yeah,
I can tell you after
it's
49 commander decks, that is not like it's just not possible.
as much as we wish it was, but
Mhm.
it's definitely something that you have to think about when you're looking for pods. If you're going into something blind, is to just be aware of that and have that conversation. But I also think that it gets a little blown out of proportion just because these are the moments that you really remember, these sour moments, or the thing you saw online or somebody complained about it on Twitter. The majority of people, I think, are going to be reasonable and are going to be a fun time because we're all playing the same game. We all love this game. We all love the social aspect and the self expression. And one of the ways you can really make this work for you is by joining a community, whether you're in Kuro's Discord or my Discord or the Play EDH Discord, or it doesn't have to be Discord. It could be a Facebook group. It could be maybe you have a local game group that meets on Facebook and goes to the library and plays Magic or D&D or whatever. There is a lot more for you out there, and you don't have to expect every game to be a terrible experience because you don't know what you're going into. Majority of people are great and fun and nice, and I promise you that you remember the bad ones because it's the exception to the rule. It's something you don't want to let sour your experience, because that's why we have these conversations, is so that it happens less often, because there's so many people coming into the game and we want everyone to have this good experience. So that's why we talk about it over and over and over again, so that people coming into the game know, like, hey, let people know if you're playing a combo deck, let people know if you're playing CDH in the pod, so that people can bring the appropriate response or say, no, I'm going to go play in a different pod. Just be respectful of everyone's time.
Exactly, including your own.
Absolutely. It's probably not that fun to stomp pods or to play like a very weak deck in a pod that's full of strong decks. Like, it's just, I can't imagine that being fun. So you should definitely be respectful of your own time as well, and make sure that you're getting into situations that are actually going to be fun, and that you're not just playing because you said you would play. Like, you can come in saying, hey, this is the game experience I want to have, before you actually shuffle up and play. I don't know what
100%.
the segue is here, but I want to wrap back around to the combos with tutors because you mentioned that earlier. I'll
Oh,
probably have to shuffle it around in
yeah.
post. But
Yeah.
something about tutors that I think is really important is that let's preface this with saying that combos do not equal power level. I had combos in a deck that I would consider a power level 3. And that deck
Mhm.
had multiple tutors in it. It had fast mana in it. And it was still a 3 because it was just that bad of a deck. It was just that poor at doing what it did, and what it did wasn't very strong. You need to break this idea that combos equal CDH or they equal like a very strong experience. They usually do mean that because magic cards are just getting better all the time. But you can have an experience, you can curate your experience to be different. So if you're playing a stronger deck and you're playing a combo in that deck, then playing tutors kind of like skyrockets the power level because you're just increasing the odds that you're going to see that. But if you're playing a
Mhm.
very low power deck, then you probably don't have to feel bad about playing tutors because you're probably just not going to win the game anyway. You're already at a disadvantage. Generally speaking, I would say tutors are a way to kind of lower, I shouldn't say lower. They're a way to increase the power level of your deck, but make sure that that scales with whether or not you're running combos. If you're playing tutors but you're not playing combos, then your deck is probably a little bit less powerful than a deck that's playing tutors and a combo, just because they have that option and you don't. But generally speaking, your deck is probably pretty degenerate if you're running multiple combos and tutors, and a lot of people are probably going to call you boring, maybe myself included, unless you're playing CDH. If you're playing CDH, then obviously nothing is off the table, so you can do whatever you want. But if you're playing in a pod, especially a blind pod, if you're playing a combo deck and that's all you say, and you don't say like I'm running all the fast mana and all the tutors, then you're kind of setting yourself up to fail because you're not really indicating that your deck is going to go off probably a little bit sooner than the rest of the pod. And they should be forthcoming with that information too, but everyone should be honest about what their deck can do. So if you're playing tutors, that needs to be a part of your conversation too, because the power level immediately goes up if you're playing combos where you can just find the pieces and not have to spend resources to draw into them, or just extend the game so that you can draw into them naturally.
It is a discussion. It is tough. It really is just tough because you can definitely be a powerful deck that just has tutors but not necessarily combo, right? Sometimes it's just that synergy, which is probably why I have such an adverse reaction to tutors, because like it's hard for me to diagnose where, like, how much of a threat I should find it, because that's frustratingly difficult for me. I probably just tend to over target them too much, or just like kind of overvalue them. That's my toxic trait, believing that every single tutor is like just needs to be like is the worst.
I'm in the same boat.
Um,
I have a player in my play group who plays all the tutors in his super casual decks, and it always throws me off because if someone plays demonic tutor or vampiric tutor, I just assume they're getting the strongest card in their deck, and he'll just be like, I'm just getting a generic vampire. It's like, okay, well, I guess I didn't actually need
right.
to be scared.
Yeah, that person's like self-expression about the game, right? Like they want to play these cards to go like, hey, if their desire was just to get some goober vampire, like they're living their best life, and that is fine. Like by them, let them do so. And I guess as you play with them more, you kind of learn to just, maybe it's not that big a deal, or you just kind of just keep on proceeding to try to do your best to win despite the fact that they tutored for something, because at the end of the day that's just what you got to do, right? Especially black tutors where you don't even know what they got. You just have to do what you can to win past it.
That's where it's really scary, I think, because most of the tutors they'll reveal what you got, so it's telegraphed. And telegraphing
Yeah.
things is generally why people get salty. Is if it's not telegraphed enough, they didn't see it coming, they couldn't prepare for it. But with things like demonic tutor and vampiric tutor, where it's just completely blind, that's where you have to know what you're playing against. You have to know if your opponent's playing a combo or they're playing something really, really powerful. Then you'd be rightfully scared of that tutor. I think that being able to assess cards, you should be able to go into that saying like, I know you're playing Corvold. If you tutor for something, I should be scared. But if you're playing like,
Hmm.
for example, I played a very old Zhao Dun deck, which for those unfamiliar, it'll be on screen for the people watching on YouTube. But Zhao Dun basically sacrifices himself to bring a black card back from your graveyard, and that deck was so not strong. You can build it strong, but mine was very janky. But the point being, that deck had the potential to be so much stronger than it was, and it had tutors. It had a combo in it, but the combo, I'm not even kidding you, 12 mana, 5 cards, and didn't actually even win the game. It was an infinite turn combo with temporal extortion, but it wasn't even really infinite because somebody could just pay half their life total and die, because the other part of the combo would be like, at the end step, they lose life, they lost this turn. But somebody could just choose to die and the combo would end and I would just lose. But I think that's a really good example of a deck that is using a combo and tutors and has the potential to be really strong and is still really, really poor. Is something you really have to assess going in. If I bring that Zhao Dun deck to the table and I tell you, hey, I have fast mana and tutors and a combo, that's not really being honest about what the deck does. If I tell you that, you're going to be really scared if I combo if I combo. You're going to be really scared if I tutor for something blindly with like a demonic tutor. But if I tell you going in that, hey, my win condition isn't even really a win condition and it's 12 mana and I'm in mono black, then if I demonic tutor, you probably are not going to be as scared. And I want you to have good threat assessment. Like I want you to be able to play well. So I don't want to like misrepresent what my deck is.
Right. It is so tough. Like and there's just so many different ways. Like there's literally just so many different ways to approach this and Magic in general. That's why I don't blame anyone, for having like this frustration with trying to figure out like the best way to kind of go about all this, because sometimes there just isn't.
My best advice is just try everything. Try combo decks, try jank decks, try CDH, just try it all and see what fits you.
Yeah. Also, like, here's my answer: have multiple decks. Magic is so cheap in a lot of ways. Like, just comparatively, having new EDH decks is like such an easy thing to do. Having multiple decks means that you will have a more varied experience, and it's worth it to try to like go for those varied experiences. It's pretty much just kind of only going to be good for you if you do.
Yeah, it's also really useful that one of the ways, and I don't like doing it this way, but one of the ways you can have a deck that's a little bit lower power level so you can cater to that is you can just build a deck budget. And that way you can have multiple commander decks without breaking the bank. I know it's not accessible for everyone, but if you're listening to this and if you're listening to this, you're probably a big Magic fan. So you probably aren't opposed to the idea of having more decks. So if that's what you have to do, then build a budget, and the other decks you have, that maybe that's your permission to build them a little bit higher power level and include combos or tutors, because you have these other options so you can participate in more pods and make sure everybody's happy at the end of the day.
I would heavily agree. There's a lot of resources online to find, just like budget brews and everything. Magic cards individually are just cheaper than they have ever been. I believe it's very easy to make more commander decks. I mean, I got, like I said, 49 now, I think. And because of that, I'm able to more or less match any pod. But there's still always room for more. There's always room for, hey, maybe also not just different decks. This comes from when I was saying like, hey, you should expand your palette of what you kind of like to experience as an opponent and as a player. I have so many different decks because one, mainly because I like the commanders that they're from, but I make them a bit different. So like I get a different gameplay experience out of each one of them at the end of the day. And having, I guess, decks that have varied ways of winning, whether it be through combo or just like incredible synergy or just through outright damage. There's a lot of like holes or spaces in your commander deck where you can kind of fit in like just something that's really good for the sake of synergy, and maybe that's how you win that game. Or sometimes you just have a big giant creature that is just how you win that game. Or sometimes you combo out and you have infinite Sam food, and sometimes you're able to turn that into an infinite sack of historic permanent outlet or something like that, your experience in Commander shouldn't, because there's just so many flavors, it shouldn't be completely soured on a gameplay style because of a couple bad experiences.
They're super overblown. It doesn't happen nearly as much as people talk about it. The majority of your games will be
Yeah.
fine, guys. Don't be afraid to play Magic because you're expecting to run into pods that are playing all combos or not playing any combos. Just talk to people. I know it's not easy for everybody, but it's easier than you think, I promise.
It is definitely easier than I think a lot of people kind of go into it with, for sure. For sure, for sure.
And if you're in these like Discord communities as well, then you're generally going to find the same energy from a lot of these people. I have never had a bad game playing with anyone from Kuro's community. I've played with Lion's community. I've played with a lot of people, guys, a lot of people online, and they're all kind of in these same circles and they're all great people. Like you can very easily find the play group for you, and you just have to try. And even if you just go to your LGS, you'd be
Mhm.
surprised how many people will just offer to let you play their deck because they just want to see you have a good time with it. They want to see their own deck go off. That's a way you can experience the game too, is just finding other people who enjoy the game and seeing how they enjoy the game. And a lot of times they'll want you to experience that too. They're very happy to impress their play style upon you because that self-expression is obviously for them, but it's also a way for you to kind of engage with the community in a way that's both healthy for your play groups, but it's also healthy for you to grow as a player and as a person in that social experience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, one could even say all of it, is just ways for you to learn and grow. Take these opportunities if and when you can, to learn something new about the game, about yourself, and kind of just like what you enjoy and what you can get out of the game as you're playing it and everything. And just yeah, just embrace it. Just embrace the great diversity that Magic has, and part of that is combo decks. That it is, but it's not the end of the world. In fact, it's like the beginning of it. It actually goes even deeper than that, and there's still just like so much fun to be had.
Yeah, it's definitely try out these things that you may not enjoy from the get-go, especially if you are one who likes commander, using your commander to express yourself. Maybe you just really like commander reliant combos. Maybe you're playing so that you can get that experience off, or maybe if you don't like doing that, like I played a Baba Yaga deck recently. I think that was on Lion Stream with Benjamin Wheeler from Loading Ready
Hey,
Run.
I know that guy.
Yeah, great guy. I believe he's also going to be at Commander Sealed. I think
Sick.
you'll definitely see these people, and they can, if you ask them, they might even remember that I won with my Baba Yaga deck that has no combos in it, just purely through attrition. We got
Hmm.
there, and it was a great experience, and I loved it. But I also would not have hated it if I just got to combo out and ended the game 20 minutes early, because that game dragged on, and there's
Yeah.
a place for that too.
Yeah, hey, it's some people do say. I typically don't. People do say, "Hey, the game's got to end sometime," and that is a perfectly valid like desire. And you could just move on to the next game. Sometimes it's just good to be able to just like say, "Hey, I liked the game that we had. I definitely think that I can do better. Do you want to like go to the next one? Like, do we just want to go to the next one and be fine, or do we want to keep on going? What do we want to do?" Sort of thing. So basically, don't give up and don't completely cut yourself off from different ways of playing Magic. I definitely like. I would love to talk to the crowd that's specifically like, hey, I don't want to play any anything that's a non-combat only. I've never run into them, but if so, I'd still like to have this discussion, or at least kind of see where you're coming from, and I would like to play a game with you. Maybe we can see we're coming from on a gameplay perspective. As much as I dislike group hugs, like I still had my eyes opened to at least certain types of group hug decks that I can enjoy. So and then I built my own group hug deck that is more aligned with like how I enjoy Magic as well. And then I've called people, like I've said like, hey, wow, you have my most favorite group hug deck I've ever played against, and I typically don't like them. So like it was really, really great to play against that. I've had moments like that. That feels good to people to know that like you had a good positive experience with them. So definitely give people props when they actually make you have a good time as well. That always makes people happy.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be negative feedback in these conversations. Like, definitely tell people if you had a great time, because it's very validating is if you build a deck and you build it very personal to you, and someone says that was super cool. I loved seeing that go off. I love the
Yes.
synergy, and I've built decks
Yes.
just based off of what other people have shown
Oh,
me.
100%. 100%. Yeah, no, people have told me that they've done that, and I'm like, that's freaking awesome. Did you upgrade it since last time? Like, do you want to sit down and play? Like, I will. Any Rocco deck, the new Rocco with the Naya one, that's my favorite group hug commander that I've ever played against, and I look forward to playing against those more.
That's
So
super
it's
interesting.
like,
Just out of
yeah,
curiosity, how do you feel about group slug?
well, I don't know. That looks just like combat to me. Like I don't,
I I
that,
used
it
to
does,
have a
honestly, that
Gahiji
definition I don't
deck.
think means anything to me. What's up?
Yeah, I used to have a Gahiji deck that, and there'll be pictures listed on screen, but the main thing it does is all of my opponent's creatures, when they attack my opponents, get +2/+0. It was that and group hug cards, and I would basically just buff my opponent's creatures, but encourage
Right.
them to attack each other instead of me. This is pre-Goad, by the way. Goad was almost non-existent when Gahiji was printed. So there's a lot
So
more
I
ways to
know,
force combat now.
and actually, especially on that note, because like Gahiji is a precon commander, and one of the reasons why I like precons is because they are adding, like they make decks in those styles to introduce that discussion to like the wider audience. So Gahiji was the first time I ever truly experienced group slug, and that's kind of what group slug, if I was to put a definition to it, that's what it would mean to me. It would just be like a Gahiji deck, which makes sense. And I like Gahiji a lot. If I was more attuned to Naya, I would have definitely made a Gahiji deck by now for sure. Group Slug is perfectly fine by me. That's just combat damage to me, in my opinion. Like just in terms of how I'll respond to it. That's just combat damage with a little extra steps.
Naya does have access to a lot of the good group hug cards, so I really liked it because not only was I encouraging them to attack each other, but I was also helping them kind of develop their boards. So they were basically goad, but you were goading them as a friend. You weren't forcing them to do it. They were just
I
attacking
advise
because
you
they were
to attack this
buffs.
person. Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's because it would be less damage if they attacked me. So it wasn't a whole thing. And I don't like prison cards. So I
Oh,
don't play like Ghostly Prison. So it was purely a politic kind of thing. And I've played Kami,
see,
the
and that's
Boros boar, not
politics.
the Boros, the Gruul boar that you
Hmm.
goads things when you enchant them, and just enchanting
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
opponent's creatures with like huge buffs, but they can't attack you is hilarious.
I entirely agree. My mod will yell at me if I don't mention. I realize I have a group slug deck, and for me, I call that politics. Maybe that's why I didn't kind of immediately recognize it. But even then, the overlap between a politics deck and a group slug deck are so very close. But mine is my black white Brina, the demagogue deck. I say that's politics more than group slug because I'm just like, okay, but like, listen, if you attack both of my opponents, you get to draw a card. Isn't that super cool? Politically, I like incentivize you to go attack someone else. Then we both gain off of it. Whereas I guess Kihiji is just more like, I don't know, my guy, look at the number of like your power. You should probably swing at someone, but like, it's even better if it's like not me. And maybe that's like group hug and less politics. It's all subjective in a way. But yes, I appreciate those deck styles. And to me, that just sounds, yeah, that's just like, it's just like a combat genre of a deck.
It's a cool design space, and I appreciate that Wizards is consistently printing into new design spaces because whether they're combo worthy or not, it lets people experience the game in different ways. A lot of times they do end up comboing, and I would love to talk to somebody on the design team about how they design cards and why does this card combo with everything? Like, is this intentional? Do you like do this on purpose? why does Shalai and Halar combo with a ham sandwich? I just don't,
Yeah. Sometimes they just had a specific design in mind, and it turns out that design, when you put it around the backdrop of everything else in EDH, turns out a ham sandwich in that card just go infinite.
I like to think that they just completely ignore EDH and Legacy as concepts when they're designing cards, because I hope they do, just because it makes it more interesting when they're crazy. But it's also like, there's no way they didn't know that all will be one would combo with a million things, especially the 2 cards that came out like right after it or right before it.
That's why it's a mythic.
One thing I wanted to touch on is, if you are very anti-combo, but you don't want to stop people from playing combo because you respect that they have that choice, you can play anti-combo cards, and I fully endorse it. I think you should
100%.
play the cards that punish people for playing 0-cost spells. I'm going to throw a bunch up on screen because I'm blanking on the names, but you can play Lavinia. You can play the red one that prevents people from getting life. Kuro's a Lavinia player, so I'll let him say his piece here.
Yes, Lavinia is perfection. I think just blue-white Lavinia is just like the perfect blue-white card. Make everyone play at like at just like normal pace. I love it so much. I mean, there's artifacts that like punish people for like, every card they play, beyond like the first one, they take 1 damage, every time they do that. So if you know that you're going up against a lot of combo decks where it's like cast a bunch of cards, you can run artifacts, things like that. There's things that you can put in your deck. And I know it kind of sucks to hear like, oh, you have to have less fun in your deck in order to, I guess, like keep combo players in check. There's a limit.
That's the price you pay for spite.
And there's just like a limit to that, right? Like at a certain point, it's just like, most combos can be interrupted if you interact with the card. So like if it's a combo
Kuro, I'm a Magic player. I hate playing interaction.
Well, I mean, if you're anti-interaction, I don't know how to help you. That I guess is definitely something that's antithetical to how I enjoy Magic. But if you're anti like kill spells or removal, then
some things you should just be running. You should be running Graveyard Hate in your commander decks. I know there's only so many slots, but please run Graveyard Hate. There's so many Graveyard decks that get away with it. Punish them, please.
In every black deck, at the very least. Sometimes you don't draw it, right? Like, I'm not saying you have to run, like, every deck needs to run Grafdigger's Cage. I'm not saying that at all. But, like, sometimes being able, in black, to be able to hope that you will run into a Bojuka Bog is worthwhile. Or sometimes there's creatures that just say, hey, when the card goes to the graveyard, exile it. There's just, like, so much incidental that.
Play Soul Guide Lantern. At the very least, it draws you a card. You don't have to play bad cards. There's a lot of good hate cards out there now. And you can play any anti-storm card. They turn off almost every combo. And you don't have to play stacks. You can just play you don't have to play Rule of Law. You can play like Damping Sphere. Damping Sphere is a very fair card. Like, no one's they might hate you for playing it, but they're not gonna say you're a stacks player.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes it's just worth it to run these things. There is room in your deck, especially if you, I guess, depending on how you build it, right? But like, there is room in your deck to find the answers, because typically you're not going to play 100% of your deck every single game. So sometimes there's space for you to just maybe, just take out one of the super special pet cards and just put Swords to Plowshares, because a lot of your issues with combos can be removed by just having a removal card. And then that means even if you're not playing against a combo deck, you can still interact with your opponents who are fighting through combat,
I would definitely recommend you play the best interaction that's in your colors. You don't have to play Silver Bullets if you don't want to. But if you're playing white, you should be playing Swords to Plowshares. If you're playing blue, you should probably be playing a non-zero amount of counter spells. Don't at me. Don't look at my deck lists that don't have counter spells in them. But you should probably be playing a non-zero amount of counter spells or some other way of interacting. If you're playing red, you should probably have some damage-based creature removal. You should have board wipes, generally speaking. And if you're playing green, I guess you're playing Beast Within. You don't have a lot of options there, but
Yeah.
fight cards, you
I
know.
mean, like Beast Within is reprinted in so many times. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be hard for you to get. It's a dollar if it's like if your card store does bulk rares or something, and just having a Beast Within is just general removal for a lot of different situations. There's room in your deck for a Beast Within. There's room in any green deck for Beast Within. Sometimes like that's just all you need. Sometimes you just need to interact with that one piece to stop that combo deck, and then at least from going off right then and there, and then you proceed to beat them in the face, whatever, and that person is going to just take it on the chin because that's just how Magic is.
If you're playing green, I am begging you to play Return to Nature. They've reprinted it into the ground, destroy an artifact, an enchantment, or exile a graveyard. It's so good. I never see it, but it's such good interaction. I'm begging you to play it. It's a cent, please.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, just like you should be playing interaction in your decks. I don't think that's a hot take. I know Magic players hate playing interaction, but you should be playing it. And if you're not playing that, then you can't really complain if you don't have silver bullets for the things that you don't like in the game, I guess, is the takeaway from that. You have to make certain concessions when you're deck building, and if you don't, then maybe you need to find a play group that just doesn't play the things you don't like, I guess.
I mean, hey, I guess for the crowd that's like very anti combo, I guess that's technically what they're trying to do. And I wish them luck in just kind of, I guess, building that ecosystem. But as still at the end of the day, I implore them to like branch out, just be understanding, just be accepting at least a little bit with what other people enjoy about the game, and acknowledge that there's just different ways to play, and it's okay to one to lose, and to just enjoy different parts of Magic that you don't normally like. There's absolutely ways to do it. If I can do it about Group Hug, then you can definitely find a commander that has some sort of combo that actually like appeals to you 100%.
Wise words from Kuro. One more time for the people listening, if you're going to leave comments, please play nice. Nobody here is wrong for having their opinion or having a preferred play style. Definitely have a dialogue if you have an opinion. Like, that's the whole idea. That's why we're doing this, just so you can have a dialogue. But don't call each other names. Don't be mean. If you hate my opinion, then you can say that, but don't hate me. Hate the game.
If you are like of the opinion that like truly, I would like to talk to someone who is combat only crowd. I truly just like haven't run into that, but I would like to hear your opinions. You can definitely at me on Twitter and all that stuff. I find your opinion interesting, so I would like to hear it.
Right. So the link to Kuro's Twitter will be in the description. You can send all your hate mail over there instead of over to me.
Perfect. I'll take the brunt of this one.